I was making soup when she knocked. Not a dramatic knock, 3 small taps, the kind you do when you're not sure you're welcome. I wiped my hands on the dish towel and opened the door, and there she was, my daughter-in-law. Standing on the porch in her good coat, the green one she saves for church, and her eyes were red and her lip was trembling, and she was holding her purse with both hands like it might run away from her. I said, "Come in, that's all. Come in." She stepped inside, and I could see she'd driven a long way. Her boots were wet from the highway slush, the kind of wet you get when you've been walking across parking lots in February in northern Ontario and not caring anymore about where you step. I took her coat. I hung it on the hook by the door where my husband's coat still hangs, even though he's been gone 6 years, and I didn't say anything about. I brought her to the kitchen, and I poured her tea without asking, and I put the biscuits I'd made that morning on a plate between us, and I waited. She wrapped both hands around the mug. She didn't drink. She just held it. She said I didn't know where else to go. I said, "This is exactly where you go. I've known this girl, this woman, for 9 years. She came into my son's life when he was 31 and lost, and she steadied him the way a good dock steadies a boat in rough water. She's quiet and she's careful, and she has a laugh that fills a whole room before you realize it started. I love her the way I love the lake in September, completely and without needing a reason." But she hadn't been herself these past months. She'd gotten smaller somehow, quieter in a way that wasn't peaceful. I'd noticed. I hadn't said anything because she hadn't asked me to notice, and I was trying to respect that. But I had noticed. She said, "I need to tell you something, and I don't know how." I said, "Start anywhere." She set down the mug. She looked at the table. She said, "Your daughter," she said some things to me. "Last week, when we were all at the house for Mum's birthday, I sat still. She said, it wasn't the first time. It's been..." She stopped. She said, "She's been saying things for a while now. Little things at first. Little comments. About how I do things, about where I'm from, about..." She stopped again. She pressed her lips together. She said, "She told me last week that I never really fit in this family, that I was always going to be an outsider, that my son..." She put her hand on her stomach when she said it, "that my son wouldn't know where he belonged because of me." I said, "Because of you." She nodded. I said, "My daughter said this to you." She nodded again, and then she started to cry, not loudly, just the kind of crying that means you've been holding it in a long time and you've run out of room. I got up. I went around the table and I put my arms around her and I let her cry into my shoulder for as long as she needed to. I didn't say it's going to be okay. I didn't say I'm sure she didn't mean it. I didn't say any of the things that would have made it easier for me and harder for her. I said, "I'm glad you told me. Her name is Vivienne." No, wait, I should say it right. Her name is Autumn. My son calls her Audie. I've called her that since their first Christmas. She grew up in Sudbury, daughter of a Lebanese-Canadian family, moved to Sault Ste. Marie when she married my son, and she has worked every single day to make a life in a place that wasn't hers to begin with. That takes courage. I know because I did the same thing 40 years ago, coming up from Guelph to marry a man from the north who I'd met at a church potluck and decided was worth following into the cold. My daughter's name is Beverly. No, Claudine. Wait. My daughter's name is... Let me start. I have 2 children. My son, who I will call my son, and my daughter, who is 41 years old and who I will call my daughter, because names don't matter here. What matters is what she did. My daughter has never been easy. I say that not to excuse her and not to condemn her. Just as a fact, the way the weather is a fact. She and I have had our difficulties. She and her brother have had their difficulties. She has, for as long as I can remember, had a way of deciding who deserves what and giving it to them accordingly. She decided years ago that Autumn didn't deserve to be fully welcomed, and she's been making small payments on that judgment ever since. I knew some of this. I hadn't known the full account. That night, after Autumn had gone home, I sat in the kitchen for a long time. My soup had gone cold. I ate it anyway. I thought about what Autumn had told me, and I thought about my daughter, and I thought about my son, who didn't know yet what his wife had been carrying alone all this time. Then I thought about the baby. Autumn is 7 months pregnant. It's a boy. They're going to name him after my late husband, not the same name, but a name that means the same thing to them. I cried when she told me, months ago. I cried because he's been gone 6 years, and the world keeps finding ways to bring him back to me in small, unexpected kindnesses. My daughter knew about the pregnancy. She'd known since Christmas. She'd chosen the week of my birthday dinner, my birthday, in my home with everyone at the table, to tell Autumn that her son wouldn't know where he belonged. Because of her, I sat with that for a long time. Then I called my son. I said, I need you to come over tomorrow. Just you. Don't say anything to Autumn tonight. She needs to sleep. But I need you to come here tomorrow and I need you to bring the document she got from the clinic last week. He said, Mum, what's going on? I said, your sister have a conversation, and before we have it, I need to understand exactly what your wife has been dealing with. All of it. There was a long silence on the line. He knows me. He knows what that voice means. His father used that voice maybe 3 times in 40 years, and every time things changed afterward. He came the next morning. He sat at my kitchen table and he told me things I hadn't known. He told me about a dinner 2 years ago, where my daughter had said something to Autumn about her cooking. Not cruel on the surface, just pointed enough that Autumn had excused herself and cried in the bathroom. He told me about a comment at Thanksgiving about Autumn's family. He told me about last Christmas when his sister had cornered Autumn in the hallway and told her that my son could have done better, and that Autumn had said nothing because she didn't want to ruin Christmas. I said, why didn't you tell me? He said Autumn didn't want you to have to choose. I looked at my son and I thought, this woman loves you so much she's been protecting your family from the truth about itself. I didn't say that. I just nodded. I said, where is Autumn now? He said, at home. Resting, she didn't sleep well. I said, okay, I need you to do something for me. I need you to go home and be with your wife. I need you to tell her that you know and that you're not going anywhere. I need you to order her something good for lunch and I need you to sit with her and I need you to trust me to handle the rest. He looked at me for a long moment. He said, Mum, don't do anything. I said, I'm not going to do anything I'll be ashamed of. Go home. I called my daughter that afternoon. I want to be honest about this part. I was not calm in the way that people are calm when they don't feel anything. I was calm in the way you are when you've made a decision and the making of it has already settled something inside you. I was 64 years old sitting in the kitchen where I have sat through 30 years of hard things, and I picked up the phone and I called my daughter and I said, I need you to come to the house. Not this weekend. She said, Mum, I have work. I said, I know. Come after work. But come. She heard something in my voice, the same thing my son had heard, and she said, okay. She arrived at 6:30. She had wine. She set the bottle on the counter the way she always does, the familiar way of someone who knows this kitchen, and she kissed my cheek, and she said something about the drive, and I let her get her coat off before I said anything. I said, sit down. She sat. I sat across from her, no wine, no tea, no biscuits this time, just the table between us. I said, I need you to tell me what you said to Autumn at my birthday dinner last week. She went very still. I said, I need you to say it out loud. To me, she started to talk about how it had been a difficult evening, about how Autumn could be sensitive, about how she'd only been trying to be honest. I let her talk. I listened to every word. I did not interrupt her. When she was done, I said, is that everything? She said, Mum, you know how she can be. I said, I know how you can be. She opened her mouth, closed it. I said, I've been thinking about this since last night, and I want to say it carefully so you understand what I mean. What you have been doing to that woman, not just last week, for years, the things your brother told me this morning, is not something I can call a misunderstanding. You've been chipping at her. You've been patient and deliberate about it. You chose my birthday dinner with the whole family at the table to tell a 7 months pregnant woman that her child wouldn't know where he came from. Because of her. My daughter said, that's not what I meant. I said, then tell me what you meant. Explain it to me. Takes as long as you need. She couldn't. She tried. She said things about loyalty and about how the family had changed and about how she just wanted things to be like they used to be. I listened to all of it. I understood that underneath it there was pain that was real. My daughter has been lonely for a long time. Her marriage ended badly. She has things she hasn't healed from. I know this. I hold it alongside everything else she's done. I said, I understand that you're hurting. I have never stopped wanting good things for you. But I need you to hear me clearly right now. She looked at me. I said, Autumn is my daughter, not by blood, by choice, and by the 9 years she has spent in this family, and by the son she is about to bring into this world, who carries your father's meaning in his name. You have one chance to make this right. One. And it doesn't look like an explanation. It looks like you picking up the phone and calling her and saying, I am sorry, without a but attached, without a caveat, without a reason why she made you do it. My daughter's eyes filled. I said, if you can't do that, then the dinners stop. The holidays stop. You will see me, and I will love you, but I will not set a table where she doesn't feel safe. That is not a threat, it's just what's going to happen. The room was very quiet. She said, You'd do that. I said, I already did it in my head last night. I'm just telling you now, so it's not a surprise. She cried then, not the way Autumn had cried. Autumn had cried with relief. My daughter cried with something more complicated. Shame, maybe, or grief, or both. I didn't reach for her. I stayed where I was. I let it happen. After a while she said, I don't know how to talk to her. I said, Start with I'm sorry, the rest will come if you mean it. She left without the wine. I stood at the window and watched her car back down the driveway, and I thought about my husband, who died before he got to see any of this. The grandchild coming, the fractures that had been growing quietly in the family he built. I thought about what he would have done. He would have done exactly what I did, I think. He would have sat at that table and said the hard thing without flinching, and then he would have made soup. I made soup. 3 days later, Autumn called me. She called me. My daughter-in-law's voice was soft, careful. She said she called me and she apologized. I said, What did you say? I said, thank you. I said I needed to think. I didn't forgive her yet because I'm not there yet, and I didn't want to say something I didn't mean. I thought, this woman my son found. I said that was exactly the right thing to do. There is a thing that happens in families when someone finally names what's been wrong. It doesn't fix everything. It doesn't undo the years of small cruelties, or the dinners eaten in silence, or the Christmases where someone was quietly disappearing from the room they were sitting in. It doesn't fix those things. But it changes the air. It makes it possible to breathe again. My daughter did eventually call back. It took her 2 weeks. She asked Autumn if she could come for coffee, not at my house, at Autumn's house, which was right. Autumn said yes. I wasn't there. I don't know what they said. Autumn told me afterward that it was hard and it was short, and it was a beginning, not an ending. I said that sounded right. My daughter still has work to do. She knows that. I know that. The road between where she is and where she needs to be is not a short one, and I will not pretend otherwise. But the table is still set. Easter came and everyone sat down, and I made the lamb my husband's mother taught me to make, and my son poured the wine, and the baby was here by then. Born in late March, 6 pounds 14 ounces, a face like crumpled grace. And Autumn held him at that table, and my daughter sat across from her, and they were quiet together in a way that wasn't comfortable yet, but was trying to be. I watched them. I watched the baby sleep in his mother's arms in the April light that was coming through the window over the sink, and I thought about my husband's name and how it was in that room now, even though he wasn't. I cleared the dishes. I started the water in the sink. My son came and stood beside me, and he said, Thank you, Mum. I said, For what? He said, For all of it. For not letting it go and not blowing it up either. I said, Your father would have done the same. He put his arm around me for a moment, and then he went back to the table. I washed the dishes. I listened to the noise of my family in the other room, the baby fussing a little, my daughter-in-law's quiet voice settling him, my daughter asking about something, laughter eventually, the small, ordinary sound of people trying. That is what I can give them. Not the absence of difficulty, not a family where the hard things never happen, just the table, just the door that stays open, just the willingness to sit across from someone and say, Here is what is true, and here is what we're going to do about it. The soup was on the fuss stove. I turned it down to low. I put the kettle on. Outside, the snow had finally started to melt, the way it does in Ontario in April. Slowly and then all at once, the lawn coming back brown and then green enough that you start to believe in it again. I believed in it.